Hey guys, welcome back. Here's another video. This time I'm going to react to 25 things that only happen in Australia. I don't normally watch these sort of things or react to them because most of the time it's just bullshit. So they're written by people who've never been to Australia or have any idea about what goes on in Australia. So let's have a look at this one and let's see how well they do. 25 things, you would hope that they get 20 right, but normally they get about 50% wrong. So let's have a look at this.
G'day, mate. As you've probably guessed, I'm greeting you from the land down under, where people pay.
Not a good start. Alright, so an American guy going, "G'day, mate." It's not that, it's "G'day."
With plastic money. Some fish are over 300 million years old, and cockroach racing is a big deal. You better listen up, or else my friend, the drop bear, will find you. If only it were real. Number 1. To get an idea of how huge Australia is, just imagine this. There's a cattle ranch called Anna Creek Station that's bigger than Israel. With an area of 5,851,000 acres, it's the largest working cattle ranch in the world, and it's 7 times larger than America's biggest, located in Texas. Number
There's something I don't like, alright. How hard is it to actually get a picture of Anna Creek? That's not Anna Creek, I don't even know if that's in the Middle East somewhere. That's in Afghanistan. Okay, so all you have to do is Google and it'll have all the pictures of Anna Creek. It's world famous. I've got a mate who actually used to work there, and it used to take 8 hours to get from the gate to the homestead on a bike.
51,000 acres. It's the largest working cattle ranch in the world. eBay listings, but one guy from Australia out-weirded them all. In 2006, he tried to sell New Zealand at a starting price of less than a cent. It escalated quickly, but when the price reached $2,100 with 22 bidders, eBay closed the auction. They explained
2,100 seems overpriced for New Zealand.
that a nation of 5 million was definitely not for sale. Number 3. If you're over 18 years old, then you're legally old enough to vote in Australia. But missing a vote without a good reason will cost you anywhere from $20 to $50. 20 is for first-timers, and if you do it again, it rises to 50. If you refuse to pay the fine, be prepared to say goodbye to your driver's license.
Alright, so we have compulsory voting in Australia. When you turn 18, you're not legally allowed to vote, you have to vote. So yeah, that's true. You get a $20 fine if you don't vote. I've never had the fine because I want to vote. I want to be a participant in my country and make sure that the government is doing what we want it to do. I don't believe that you lose your driver's license. I think it just goes under your tax. They just take it out of your tax.
Number 4. What does the Sydney Opera House look like to you? A bunch of sails? In fact, the architect who designed it was inspired when eating an orange. If you put together the segments, it would be a perfect sphere. Danish architect Jorn Utzon never got to see his masterpiece completed since he moved back to his country when financing was suspended after 9 years of working on the project. Number 5.
Guys, if you ever come to Australia, make sure you go to Sydney Harbour. I believe it's the best harbour in the world. And that particular area, we've got the coat hanger, and then you've got the Sydney Opera House. But just looking out over the harbour, it's just a beautiful harbour. And if you've got an opportunity, go out on a boat because it's just fantastic.
5. There are 150 random giant sculptures across the country. Giant statues of mushrooms, acorns, ants, boxing crocodile, and whatnot are placed along roads to attract tourists. It's hard to resist the temptation of a giant cheese statue that was made for selfies, you know. Some people even deliberately go on road trips to take pictures of all the big things of Australia, as they're called. Number 6.
That's a real thing. Alright, so if you go north of Brisbane, you got the big banana, and not the big banana, big pineapple, and you come into towns where they've got a big bull and big cows and big prawns in Ballina, and yeah, that's a real thing.
Number 6. Normally, road signs give you precautions or inform you about something. In Australia, Some roads are so long and boring that they put signs there to entertain drivers. They can contain images of rich local fauna or trivia questions to keep you alert and possibly even save your life in the fatigue zone. Number 7.
Alright, so that's true. They also have like jokes that they put on signs, so they'll say, "Is your driver a jerk?" and then cross it out and then put alert. Or they say, "Make sure you tell your kids to belt up," as in shut up. We also have audible lines, so on long straights, like through the Northern Territory, anywhere there's a long straight, because you get all the queue coming off the road. Sometimes it looks like you're going into an abyss, into the never never. All right, so they have audible lines when you're coming up to like big sweeping turns to make sure that your thing to do. Also have audible lines on the left, so that if you start getting white line fever, you start drifting over, it'll wake you up. And also on the really long stretches, every couple of kilometres, they have audible lines just to make sure that you're awake. A lot of people lose their life in the middle of Australia. They're not used to the distances. A lot of people just aren't used to driving for 8 hours straight in a straight line at 120 kilometres, 130 kilometres an hour. So, and you know, you might drive for seven hours straight and not see a car. So yeah, that's a big thing. But yeah, that's part of living in a big country. I'm sure it happens in America, in Russia.
What could be even better than trivia at saving your life? A seatbelt, of course. In 1970, the Australian state of Victoria became the first on the planet to introduce the compulsory seatbelt law for drivers and front seat passengers. Number 8.
Yeah, so that's a big thing. You'll get fined for not wearing a seatbelt. They actually have cameras now that will make sure that you've got a seatbelt on. So speed cameras are a huge thing in Australia. They have speed traps everywhere. So not only that, they also just take random pictures of cars, and if they notice that the driver's not wearing a seatbelt, you also get a fine for that. So all the fines in Australia, majority of them are automatic, so you don't even know. So unless you actually see the flash of the camera, which you might see at night time, but during the day it's pretty hard to. So 1 month later, you just get a letter from the government saying that you owe $333 and you lose 3 points on your license. Some people, when they first bought in speed cameras, some people lost their license in a whole day. So in Australia, if you go through a school zone, it goes down to 40, so that kids don't get hit by cars. So the first day they bought it in, a lot of mothers were taking their first kid to school. They were doing 62 kilometres in a 60 zone or 42 in a 40 zone. They get 3 points for that. Then they turn around and they come back out and they get 42 in the 40 zone, they get another 3 points for that. Then they go home and then they take the next kid to kindergarten or something like that at 11 o'clock. Same thing, 2 kilometres over, get another 3 points, and by the whole day, they'd racked up enough points that they lost their licence and about $3,000 in fines.
Americans were the first to patent the UGG brand, but the legendary boots actually come from Australia. Farmers and peasants have been wearing sheepskin turned inside out as boots since the beginning of the 20th century. The locals call them very ugly boots and wear them both outside and inside.
Not true. We don't say very ugly boots. We just call them UGG boots. And yeah, it's a small family-owned business. They've been making them for 150 years or something, and then some American company patented the word UGG. And yeah, that was a bit of and then said that this family who actually make the things aren't allowed to use their name anymore. So corporate greed, of course.
Why inside? Because when it's cold outside, the houses are really cold too. So Uggs can help you keep warm.
That's something that a lot of people don't realise, that in Australia, most houses don't have heating, even if they live in a cold place. Unless you live in a really cold place, you might have a fireplace. But say I'm from Brisbane, 90% of the year is warm, 23 degrees, 24 degrees, but in winter it can get cold. But we don't invest so much money in heating. We just put up with the cold for a couple of weeks a year. and we have electric blankets instead, so we just warm up the bed. But yeah, it can get very cold, like -4, -5. We just suck it up and wait for the sun to come up, so then we go outside and warm up.
Number 9. Since 1988, Australian money has been made out of polymer, a special kind of plastic. Australia was the first country in the world to introduce plastic money. It's more practical since it stays in good condition for a longer time than paper banknotes. One cool fact about plastic bills here is that if you tear a $10 bill in 2 parts, you can use each half as a $5 bill.
No, you can't. It's illegal to disfigure money, whether it's plastic or paper or whatever, coins, whatever. It's illegal to do that, and you wouldn't be able to give half of $10 to $5. No one would accept that. But it's a really good invention. Before we got to plastic money, I think the average paper lifespan was about 2 weeks. Now it's about 6 months. Now I remember that the time that they came out, I went to the beach, and I had a $50 note in my pocket that I forgot about, and I swam for about 3 hours or something, and just as I came out, I remembered and went, oh no, I got money in my pocket, pulled it out, and it was perfect. But if I did that with a pineapple, a paper pineapple, it would have deteriorated and I would have lost $50.
Number 10. Australia is such a great place to be that at least 70 tourists overstay their visas every week. According to the Australian Department of Home Affairs, there are at least 62,000 people who came to the country for a vacation and stayed forever. It might be the really good salaries and social support, the striking beauty of the country, or something in the water that makes them choose Australia over their home countries. Number
That's true. We're not huge on immigration, deporting people and stuff like that. We just prefer that they're working or they're contributing. So we've got some pretty decent immigration laws. Like if you're a backpacker and you want to come to Australia, if you work in a rural setting for 3 months, you can extend your visa by a year. So a lot of European backpackers come out to Australia for 2 years. Most of those overstayers, they're probably in the middle of nowhere and they can't get to an office, so they'll sort it out when they come back. And actually, my grandmother, my nana, she came from Scotland when she was 3 years old in 1906, and she didn't get her citizenship until 1988. So she was actually an illegal immigrant in Australia for over 80 years.
Number 11. In Australia, rent-a-grandma services are pretty popular. What's the difference between a regular nanny and a professional grandma? The first will take care of your kids, and the second will take care of everything in your household, just like a real grandma would. They babysit, pet sit, cook like chefs, help arranging events, and can even be your personal assistants. And they come with a 60-day guarantee period, so if something goes wrong, you can get another grandma.
So that's an initiative of the government. I think it's called the grey workforce. It's not, I've never heard of rent-a-grandmother. It's just trying to give elderly people a bit of income, and it helps you if you've got someone who you can trust and they can cook for you and look after the house and look after your kids and look after your pets at the same time. And you're giving it someone who's retired a bit of extra cash on the side. I think the government also gives them incentives so that they might be on the old age pension, but they can earn up to a certain amount per month. But yeah, I've never heard of rent-a-grandmother.
Number 12. The super famous Australian name Kylie comes from the name of an Aboriginal Noongar hunting stick, something like a boomerang. It became popular in the 1970s thanks to local writer Kylie Tennant, who was actually called Kathleen but used her childhood nickname Kylie as her pen name. By the way, the most popular girl's name in Australia for the last 3 years is Charlotte, inspired by the daughter of Prince William.
So I've got 2 Charlottes in my family, so that is a popular name. It's actually the reason why my nieces are called Charlotte is not because of the royal baby. It's to do with one of the ships from the First Fleet. I'm a first fleeter, so my family came over with the first invasion of Europeans into Australia, and the ship that we come over on was called the Charlotte.
Number 13. Australia is home to the longest golf course on the planet. Nullarbor Links is an
God, what a terrible, that's Nullarbor. I don't know what the hell he just said. Nullarbor. How can you say that any other way than Nullarbor? Anyway, it's Nullarbor. It's also one of the longest, straightest roads in the world. Terrible road.
an 18-hole par 72 golf course that's 850 miles long. It stretches across the two southern coast states and was opened in 2009. Number 14. The first police force down under was made up entirely of convicts. In 1788, Governor Arthur Phillip decided the country needed someone to help fight the growing crime, so he created the Night Watch. 12 of the best-behaved convicts were selected to patrol the settlement. A few other convicts became members of the Sydney Foot Police, and in 30 years, there were over 60 constables in Sydney, most of them previous convicts.
If you're interested in Australian history, like particularly white history, European history, there's a really good book on Sydney called Leviathan. Okay, it tells you about the early Sydney town, about all the problems that they had, and how the city grew. Even today in Sydney, in inner city, the rocks near Sydney Harbour Bridge, it's all haphazard. It's not planned. It's just wherever they built. All the old convict cottages are still there, and they just built one there and built one there and built one there. So that's why traffic can be a nightmare in Sydney. It's not planned at all. But it's a really good book, but you've also got to remember that these people, when they say that they're convicts, what did they do? They stole a loaf of bread. You're starving to death and you stole a loaf of bread, and then you get 7 years in Australia. Okay, it's better than being hung. So, even these people that, the very few percent of the convicts that were sent out were actually hardened criminals, like murderers or rapists or something like that. Most people were just poor, and they were just sent to Australia just to get them out of London. The really, really bad ones went to, Norfolk Island or into Tasmania. Some of the stories that come out of Norfolk Island, which is the worst of the worst of the worst. Okay, these are people that they couldn't whip to death, so they ended up sending them to Norfolk. There's a couple of stories of Irish convicts that were just incredibly strong. They couldn't break them, and they died on the island. But there's one guy called the Stone Mason or something, and he averages 500 whips every week for the whole 20 years he's there. They said his back was just like a stone.
15. There was a fun incident at the official opening ceremony of the Sydney Harbour Bridge in 1932. Francis de Groot, who was a retired cavalry officer, decided to steal the show and slice through the ceremonial ribbon with his sword before the New South Wales Premier Jack Lang. As a result, de Groot was charged for the damaged ribbon, which had to be retied, and the poor guy was taken to a mental hospital.
And you wouldn't want to fuck with Jack Lang. Jack Lang was a big man, and he was also a member of the unions of the Builders Labour. I think he was Builders Labourers. So yeah, I think they might have touched him up later.
Number 16. The Australian national soccer team set a world record in 2001 when it beat American Samoa 31-0. It was the 2002 FIFA World Cup qualifying game and brought the Aussies the largest ever victory in an international football match.
If you ask, most Australians don't even follow soccer anyway, but the ones that do, they all say the same thing, that we shouldn't be in Oceania. We should be in Asia, Okay, it's not fair on the smaller countries around Australia, like New Zealand are all right at soccer, but you know all those small Tahiti and Samoa and Tonga, you know they never get a go. Whereas if we moved into the Asian League or moved into, you know, we still have to beat some of, you know, like the better teams like Japan and all that sort of stuff. But we shouldn't be in Oceania. Okay, so then at least someone like New Zealand or you know Fiji might actually have a chance of making it to the World Cup.
Number 17. Even though it's really easy to find kangaroo meat in supermarkets and restaurants across the country, it's not what Australians eat all the time, despite the common stereotype. In fact, around 3,300 tons of it, or 70% of the product, is exported to 60 countries around the world. And you can stick that fact in your pouch.
We do eat it, but yeah, it's not an everyday item. It's something that you might have on a weekend or once a month, or maybe you buy some for Christmas or Easter whenever you're having a barbecue. But it is quite popular. I like kangaroo meat. I think we should get rid of beef and we should start producing more kangaroos because the the environmental problems that cattle cause is destroying everywhere. Like look at Brazil and all that sort of stuff. So why would we do that when you've got kangaroos that have been here for hundreds of thousands of years? They don't have any footprint on the thing. We should be breeding them and get rid of beef.
Number 18. The wombat is the only animal in the world that has cube-shaped poo. Some experts believe it's used to mark territory since it doesn't roll away. Others believe it's because of the dry environment they live in. I think it's because it might have a square-shaped collar.
Again, why put up a picture of something that's not Australia? How hard is it to find a picture of a dry part of Australia, for Christ's sake, instead of having to show Egypt?
But what do I know? 19. In Australia, you can find the only living specimen from the Triassic period, over 350 million years ago. It's the lungfish, the only fish that can breathe air with a single lung in dry periods when there isn't enough water in the streams. It hasn't changed much in the last 110 million years. Kinda like root beer.
They're really interesting fish, so they come from Queensland, which is where I'm from. Yeah, they're lungfish, they've still got their lungs, they don't have gills. Well, they have a vestige of, I don't know if it's a vestige, they have the beginnings of gills, but you can watch them, they still come up, they have to breathe. But yeah, interesting fish, really old fish.
Number 20. The famous Australian drop bear is actually just a tale for tourists. The predatory, huge version of the koala won't attack you during your journey, so you don't have to put a fork in your hair, spread Vegemite behind your ears, or speak with an Australian accent. All of these tips are believed to help scare the monster away.
Okay, good, so it's not. Okay, so the drop bear comes from Bundaberg rum ads. Okay, it's a big polar bear. Okay, in one of the ads, there's Australian guys and there's a couple of Swedish backpackers. Yeah, and the guys want the girls, so they get their friend, the polar bear. He climbs up a tree and falls on their tent, and then all the girls come over and hug the guys. Okay, that's how it starts. It's just an advertising. But there's lots of, if you've got a bit of time, have a look at the Bundaberg rum ads. They're really clever. And there's one where he's in America and he's in the toilet and he's always helping out his friends.
21. In 1979, the town of Esperance in Western Australia fined NASA $400 for littering in a public park. Debris from the orbital space station Skylab happened to land there. NASA refused to pay the fine for over 30 years. 22. There's a fire in New South Wales that's been burning for over 5,500 years. It's a coal fire hidden 100 feet beneath Mount Wingan. Wingan is what the Aborigines call fire, and they used it for cooking, warmth, and so on. 23. Every year, the Cockroach Racing World Championship takes place in Brisbane. The first one took place in 1982, and ever since, it's become a big hit. If you ever decide to take part in it, You can either bring your own roach or buy one directly at the event venue.
No, they wouldn't let you bring your own, just in case you drugged it up. But yeah, that's a big thing. Okay, I think that happens at the Storybridge Hotel. They do it during their beer festival. They have all the beers from around the world. But yeah, most like rural pubs have some sort of gimmick like that. I know there's a pub just near me. They have cane toad racing every Sunday. You get pig racing, ostrich racing, all sorts of stuff. But yeah, not so much cockroaches, more cane toads would be more likely to see. And it's just like an auction. Okay, they have like 20, 15 cockroaches. They draw a number on their back, and then they hold them up and say who wants to bid for number one, and you might get 500 or something like that, and that money goes to help the local community.
24. Australians tend to invent nicknames for everything. Aussie, which is short for Australia.
Not Aussie.
Brissy is Brisbane. Footy is football. G'day is good day. Arvo is afternoon, and Barbie is barbecue. Keep it in mind when you visit Straya. Yeah, that's what they call
No, we don't. We call it Australia.
their own country. 25. Australia could have been Dutch. Dutchman Abel Tasman discovered Australia in 1642, over 100 years before James Cook in 1770. However, the British took over the land, and decades later, New Holland became Terra Australis, and then Australia. Abel Tasman got the island nation Tasmania named after him. So,
Actually, that's not true either. There's an earlier Dutch guy. They found a plaque in Kakadu. Jans Jansen, I think his name was. He came here the first. So there's actually like a stone engraving. And then, but more interesting than that was when when Captain Cook arrived, the French arrived 3 hours later. So if you're in Sydney, you've got a place called La Perouse, which is the name of the French captain. So it was more likely to become French. There's a couple of interesting things about like history, unknown history of Australia. I'm pretty sure the Chinese were here. Chinese were here in the 1400s. After a big storm in Tasmania, took out some beaches. They found 2 Chinese junks that were up inside like a landslide come down and opened up 2 Chinese junks, and they found a couple of junks in New Zealand as well, and they're all dating from a guy called Zheng He, which is early 1400s, 1410s, 1450s, 1410 to 1450. I think that's when he did all his travels. Also found some Chinese coins in Tasmania and in New Zealand. And they think that the treasure fleet that was going around the world, there was a comet hit somewhere in South America, which caused a massive tidal wave and wiped out the whole Chinese fleet that was around the Pacific at the time. And that's why they found the boats up about 100 meters up in above sea level. But yeah, there's lots of cool things. There's some really good Aboriginal art in Kakadu and in the middle of Northern Territory, Western Australia. There's some really great animals that have been extinct for 50,000 years or 60,000 years. There's a really popular one that you can't go to, of course, but because, you know, it's protected, of a big ostrich type bird. And it's a beautiful rock painting of it. So we know that Aboriginal people have been in Australia for at least 60,000 years. Most people accept it up to about 80,000 years. And I think the oldest person found is 100,000 years in Mungo Man. So yeah, so Aboriginal people are definitely the longest continuous race of people on Earth, and it really shows with their culture and how close they are to the land and their stories and just the feeling that they have. Anyway, yeah, so all right, not the best. I never like when I hear Americans narrate these kind of movies, or someone like the worst one I've seen is the 10 things why not to go to Australia, and 8 of them aren't even in Australia. But anyway, if you like this, please like and subscribe. It always helps out with the algorithms with YouTube. Hopefully you have a good day, and or good day, or whatever the hell he said. And hopefully this is a bit more informative from a local person. And Salada.